Hey, welcome to Financial Revelations. This is episode 26. I am David Safransky, your host every week. We've never had a guest host. We probably never will have a guest host. Nobody does this quite the way I do, and nobody wants to do it except for me. So here we are. On Financial Revelations, we are on Twitter, and you can go to at FI Revelations on Twitter, and follow us there. I've done a couple of surveys. We have a few more followers, but it's nowhere near enough. So I need you to go and follow me on Twitter. Well, I don't need you to, but it'd be kind of nice to get some data from Twitter, even though it's not scientific. I know that. And if you have questions, you can always email Joshua at EPSF. It'll be up here, Joshua at EPSF.com. Now, last week, the Fed came out with their meeting minutes. They had a press conference. Chair Powell came out with the press conference, and I had made a prediction. I had two tracks that we could go, track one and track two. And I told you which one I thought was going to happen. And I got to say, my Fed prediction was spot on. There was no movement in the Fed rates. He said they're nowhere near doing things right now. I don't believe that's actually true. I think he's saying that for the markets and for the press and to really just kind of quiet the question about when. And he also mentioned the Delta variant, which is increasing. But it's my impression, now I'm not a scientist, and I'm certainly not a doctor, but everything that I've been reading and listening to and following kind of suggests that we're near the kind of the peak of Delta variant, and I hope that's true, because we are now talking about remasking, the possibility of some targeted shutdowns and the highest affected places. We've seen vaccine threats of retribution. We've never done anything like this before. When you think of some of the diseases that we have vaccines for, like polio, nobody makes you go get a polio vaccine. People do it. This has been significantly politicized, the vaccine. So it doesn't surprise me, but I don't think actually that the Delta variant is currently the real and most vicious threat to us. The Delta variant is going to subside. To me right now, the real threat is some of the spending bills that are attempting to go through Congress right now. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The New York City just today instituted a vaccine requirement to go out to restaurants. So I don't know how they're going to check this, and I think it's putting restaurants in a really bad position. And mask up, whatever. I don't think you need to threaten people with the vaccine, but that's where we're headed. And so what that does is it gives the Fed a lot of cover in the next couple of months to basically say and do nothing. They're not going to taper. We have a big employment number coming out Friday. These next couple of employment reports are critical because I think what it's going to show is that hiring just has not picked up. We also reinstituted or re-upped the ban on evictions. A bad idea. I don't want to see people get evicted, but certainly with 9 million jobs open, people can afford to pay for their apartments. What happens to the landlord in these places where somebody's living and they're not paying? They haven't paid in 18 months. How do those people pay for their mortgages? And I think what you could see is that in the idea of really helping people, you're really hurting people. And we're going to get to this in a second too, because this all kind of plays hand in hand with what's going on in Congress right now, which is where the real threat is. And the real threat is that spending on pet projects masquerading as infrastructure is going to go through. Now, when Donald Trump was president, he wanted to get a $900 million or $900 billion infrastructure plan, right around $1 trillion, would never get taken up in Congress. The Democrat-led House just wouldn't put it up for a vote, wouldn't even talk about it. And that's politics. I understand that. So now we're going to do about a $1.1 trillion or $1 trillion spending bill on infrastructure that includes things like mandatory DUI identification modules in new cars. Okay, maybe we need that. I don't know. It didn't appear to me like we needed that, but maybe we do. I do know that traffic fatalities were up last year, even though that miles driven were way down. I don't know exactly why that happened, but it is a fact. So maybe we do need it. There's some other things in there that are New Green Deal light. And, the thing about what I consider to be socialist programs like the New Green Deal is they're not implemented for you at all. They're implemented on you. They're hoisted upon us as citizens to follow and to have to put up with and have to pay for. They're not implemented for you. They're implemented on you. They're implemented for people like Bernie Sanders, who's never going to live under those things. He's always going to be driving a black Mercedes AMG that he's going to fill up at a government filling station with gas paid for by you. He's never going to have to charge his car in a waiting line someplace like you are. You're going to be charging your ugly EV at some charging station someplace where electricity is going to be skyrocketing in price. One of the things about EVs that I don't like is, do they have to design them ugly? I like the way some Teslas look. The Model S is kind of a work of art. But most of the other cars, I think they take them to the ugly factory and design them and then put a battery in them. I just don't know why they do that. They all look like Mork and Mindy should be flying in them. Design a nice car. People will buy it. I think the new Ford Mustang E, I think it's called, that's got a little style to it. I kind of like that. And I think as some of the bigger auto manufacturers are coming out with their EVs, they do look a lot better. Audi, I drive an Audi. Audi just came out with their EV. It is drop dead gorgeous. This car is beautiful. It also costs $160,000, so it's not going to be mass marketed. But after this infrastructure bill gets passed, which I think it is going to get passed, it's going to take a little finagling and some politicking and a little bit of tug of war. Right after that, the Democrats want to pass a $3.2 trillion spending bill that is going to be the New Green Deal on steroids. And when this gets implemented, it's what we call a tax trap. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. But we have to fight these things. It's for them. It's not for you. They're always going to fly first class and drive government-funded cars, and while we wait in line to charge our cars up at some point in time. And I don't know if that's ever going to happen. But I remember one time Rush Limbaugh said, they're coming after your SUVs. They're going to demonize your SUVs. And I thought, that's never going to happen. And it happened. Virtually everything he predicted happened. And I think, in a way, this is probably a safe prediction. They're going to come after your gas car, no matter what the gas mileage is on it. And pretty soon you're going to go to a gas station, and there's going to be no gas there. There's just going to be charging posts. I saw this. I just drove to Maine, and at the rest stops, there were charging stations. And some of them were the fast charging stations, and some of them were regular. But you had to put your credit card in. There's no more free charging. For a while, it was free charging. Those days are over. So this New Green Deal that's going to get implemented on a $3.2 trillion. Of course, they're not calling it the New Green Deal because that was effectively demonized in the last election. And so it polls very badly to say New Green Deal. So they're just going to pass the spending and then New Green Deal you and me. And it's going to be painful for us. It's going to put people out of work. We talked about the transitory inflation that we have, and the Fed chairman did mention this last week in his press conference, Chair Powell. He talked about transitory inflation with lumber and housing and microchips and all these other things. And those things will most likely subside as supply chains really reopen. They're open now, but they're nowhere near maximum capacity. And that's why we still have higher prices. But you're keeping people out of work because you're paying the COVID kicker. You're keeping people from the desire to go back to work because you're not saying, hey, you have to pay rent. In America, we pay rent. You pay for what you use. That's what capitalism is. It's not a dirty word. Capitalism is the greatest system that has ever been invented. It is not perfect, but we don't have a better system. So we're going to use capitalism, and we're going to stick with that. You're keeping people from wanting to go back to work, and that hurts productivity. Productivity is what brings down inflation. So you can be producing more and more and more, and not have it create deflation or inflation, because not only are people producing more, but they're making more. So these two things balance out. And the way that you grow your economy is you increase productivity. Right now, we have all this money in the system, but few goods and services, or fewer goods and services, because of the supply chain and people not going back to work. Well, that creates inflation. A lot of that's going to go away. But energy prices, they're not doing anything to bring down energy prices. In fact, they're doing things to bring up energy prices. Al Gore, probably the most famous and largest blowhard of all time, once said, until we have gas prices like Europe, which are $6, $7, $8 a gallon, we're not going to create any change here. Well, Al Gore probably drives a Suburban. He's not conserving fuel, is my guess. I don't have any proof of that, but if I did, I think I'd probably be right. You're going to drive the ugly little EV that takes 3 hours to charge. That's what you're going to do. And so we don't want to do those things. We want gas prices back under, right around $2. Oil per barrel around $45, $50. That encourages drilling. We are the number one energy producer in the world, and we can keep that and maintain it. Natural gas is very clean. We really should think about building a nuclear power plant or two. There's no cleaner energy than nuclear power. No greenhouse gas. Now, it's true, on the back end, nuclear power gets a little bit more expensive because you got to find something to do with all that spent fuel rod. But that's where kind of the techno wizards figure out ways to do these things. As we get close to that time, we'll figure out something to do. I have more faith in them than I do in the prophets that tell us we're all going to die. So we've got to fight the $3.2 trillion spending bills. I don't think that we're going to be successful in fighting the infrastructure, and a lot of the infrastructure will be a good thing. So when you build a road or a bridge, or you improve a road or a bridge, or you increase capacity on a highway, it does create economic activity, and it tends to pay for itself. So I'm okay with that stuff. Things that pay for themselves, I'm okay with. Things that they're going to tax you into oblivion for, I'm not okay with. And that's where I want to talk about the tax trap. They'll say, well, we need this to keep the economy going, but the economy would be going just fine if they would just get out of the way. What happens with the $3.2 trillion is they say, well, I know we said we weren't going to raise taxes on the middle class, but because of COVID and we had to spend that $3.2 trillion, now taxes have to go up on everybody. And that's the trap. It doesn't happen in this presidency, and it may not even happen in the next one, but eventually, and I'd say within 6-8 years, taxes on everybody are going to have to go up. Greece learned this lesson in a very powerful way. Greece is mainly what I would call it's a consumer economy. It's not goods and services as much as it is tourism. So tourists come over there. Well, Greece kept floating debt, and pretty soon the math just didn't work. They couldn't pay it. They were going to have to default. The EU had a great idea. They said, oh, don't default. No, you have to default. We're just going to take that debt from 30 years and make it 130 years. And see, now you can pay it. Well, nobody can do that for us. And eventually the math just doesn't work. You don't have enough money to pay the interest on the debt and then do anything in your country because everything's going to service the debt. And so they say, well, see, we got to raise taxes. There's nothing we can do. That's the tax trap. We cannot let that happen. And that's what we're in danger of allowing to happen right now. Before COVID, the unemployment rate was 3.9%. We were growing at over a 3% GDP clip. That was great. If we could have continued that. Now COVID hit, however it happened, we don't know. China, Wuhan lab. It doesn't matter right now at this point. I don't think so. But before that, things were going great. We could get back there, but we're not going to do it this way. We're not going to do it spending $3.2 trillion on the Green New Deal. It's never going to happen. So we need to fight that. I want you to call your congressman, your senator. I don't know if the White House will even answer the phone. Follow us at FI, Foxtrot India Revelations on Twitter. You can email Josh questions at joshua@epsf.com. I am David Safransky, your host of Financial Revelations. and I'll talk to you next week.